All right, let's start this since we're still missing two of the applicants, but they might join us a little later. We have a few minutes before of other things. All right, welcome everybody to the 2024 town hall. Um, Fortunately, Feynman, who was supposed to run this meeting, is feeling under the weather, and so he asked me to run this instead of him. Um, Troubadour, you're not hearing any audio. Uh, yeah, got it. Okay. Board introduction. So we have currently four board members that are continuing on and are not up for re-election. These are me. I'm up for re-election next year. So is Marley, who's been appointed. I'm trying to remember. No, Marley, were you appointed for two? You were appointed for a 2-year term. I'm trying to remember if that runs out in 25 or in 26.
25.
25. All right. So the two of us are going to be up for re-election in 2025. Feynman and Megaphone were appointed, again, to seats that are going to be they're going to be vacant in 2026. And the people who will be elected today, we have 4 seats that are up for re-election up to 2027, and we have a couple more seats. We have 3 more seats. One is up to 25 and 2 are up to 20. No, sorry. We have 4 people who have finished their term and are departing the board, and these are Ethan Dirt Magnet, Suga, Flemmy, and Wendy. And we have 2 people who are not up for re-election but have said that they do not wish to continue and have tendered their letters of resignation to the board. And these are Frida and Holly. We have a treasurer pro temp, Marco, who is temporary and has jumped in to help us with getting ready with the budget for 2024. Once the new board is elected, we will talk about either having one of the board members appointed or looking for another person to serve as treasurer. What are the board priorities? What are the
Let's try it with the speaker off.
We can hear you, Troubadour.
Speaker plugged in.
Okay, speaker's on, connected at full volume.
All right. We have several immediate priorities as the board. Well, not immediate. We have our priorities as the board for this coming year. First of all, we have critical happening in July. We will have exact dates once we finish talking to the board of directors that run our venue. We are planning to have another sea compression, as we have previously. The events committee is still discussing venues and exact dates. We will not have reignition happen this year, as it happened in the past 2 years, partially because of disinterest from producers, partially because we're trying to think about something different, not just another event the way it was thrown, but the events committee is still discussing that, and we need to figure out how exactly we want to do it. So reignition will not happen this year. Our other priorities for this year are, of course, community safety. We need to figure out what is happening with Iraq, how we want it to continue, how the relationship between the board and the RAC will look moving forward. Right now, there is no relationship. It was decided pretty much by both sides that there is no relationship, but it doesn't mean that we don't want there to be something. And so, as a board and the RAC in which form it exists right now, we need to keep talking and see how we want to do this. There's a constant topic of volunteer burnout that we are constantly trying to think how to work on that. What can we do in order to have our volunteers engaged, but also not burned out by just way too much being thrown on them? And there's some technical stuff we need to figure out, like we as the board need to just figure out with the state and some federal like things. It's not a huge thing, but we need to be able to do that in order to continue functioning as a 501c3. Anybody has any questions about this right now? Nope. All right. We'll move on. Marco, do you want to give us a financial report? Quick one, at least? Yes, Giles. Look.
Yeah, I did have a question.
Yep.
Given what is our quorum for the board? Or when we have election at the end of this, will we have a functioning board, or do we need more?
We should have.
Okay.
We should have our quorum.
I think it's 7.
It's 7.
Seven.
Quorum is
For some
7.
reason, I thought it was 10. So
No.
great.
No.
10 out of 11 is extremely difficult.
Yeah. A lot
Yeah.
of boards don't even have 11. Like when we met other boards at that Burn After Meeting
Yep.
conference, there was a lot.
It's really up to us. The quorum is a number that has been decided in our bylaws, in our articles of incorporation. And there it says that the quorum that is needed for the board to function is 7.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
No problem then.
Yep. Marco.
I apologize. I'm not prepared to deliver a financial report at this time. I've been sick myself and sort of flat on my back for the last
All right.
several days. Sorry.
Okay, let me pull up.
I
Okay.
will say though, we are going to talk about the budget at the end of this for people that want to stick around. So we will have a good discussion of some of the financial stuff
Yeah.
at the end if people are interested.
Alternatively, we can completely push this to the board meeting that's going to happen on the 17th. And kind of give an overview of what our planned budget for the next year, this coming year is. I don't think we need to have committee reports today. This is all just like a regular board meeting, and we shouldn't have those. All right, let's move on to elections. We have 5 candidates. I have seen 4 of them here. Did Tuck join us? Nope. So 4 of them are here right now. Let's start with the first one in order of application, and that would be Wi-Fi. All right.
All right. Hello,
Yeah.
everybody. I'm Wi-Fi. I am running for the board. It's something I've been thinking about for many years. I was one of the producers for Critical in 2018 and 2019. I did a safety lead for the event before that. Prior to moving to Washington, I was involved in the Austin community very heavily. I was on the board for Freezer Burn, Texas, an event that happens in mid-January. And prior to my 3 years of service on their board, I was the event safety area facilitator, which is equivalent to kind of directors in our org hierarchy model. And prior to that, I was the ranger lead for Freezer Burn. I've also done a dual lead role with Flipside's city planning team as well in 2014. So I bring many years of event production experience in 2 different regions. I've worked on bylaws. I've been a part of land contract negotiations, produced events. I want to bring that experience to INW, and also really kind of work to address a lot of the issues that Natasha listed a moment ago, right? The community safety, the burnout, kind of the organizational integrity, for lack of a better word, right? Of keeping the org intact and legal as a 501c3. Those are the things that I'm running to address. Yeah, I think that's kind of all I have prepared at this time.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Tuck, and I do not see Tuck here with us. So we will jump on to the next person, Jimmer. Jimmer Shine, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, you're muted, Jimmer.
Or you're not muted, but we can't hear you. Yeah. Nope. Still no audio. No, we do not hear you at all. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Nope.
Still nothing?
Jimmer, can you
Now
check?
you can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. All right.
Can you hear me now?
For a second, and then it was gone.
Interesting.
Yeah, now we can
So
hear
nothing,
you.
eh?
Yeah, now yes.
Now you can hear me.
Yep.
Okay.
Now we can hear you. All right.
Cool. Snazzy, glad those were in reach. I believe in carrying lots of tools. I have been carrying tools for the Seattle community since 2002, when we had a 300-person community coming out of Fremont, and Arson Island was our name. We ran with the Martians and the Space Virgins and all sorts of good kids, and I was part of the big arts community until I left the country back in 07, and been back and forth. So I was a part of the first half a dozen criticals, and I went and lived in Asia for a while, and that was a lot of fun. I'd make it back for the summer events, meaning all of our things we did here, the burn and the like. So I was able to see the events grow, and that's always been nice. I'm running for the board because it's my turn. I was around, seeing it when it got born, and I just, I was doing other things, carrying tools. I like to build stuff, and so that's my happy space when I get to build things, and I still get my hands on things, and that makes me happy. A lot of people know me for the books that I build, and those seem to be enjoyed some. So I'm into things that happen on paper. I believe in paper, and so everybody's been talking about how we need to be looking at the legalese and all that. I like that we've got a fella, Tuck. He's actually a lawyer, leaning in. That's appreciated. It sounds like Wi-Fi's got a lot of good experience. I'm looking forward to working as a collective member of the team, because that seems like what this era needs, is people who are here to push the rock up the hill for a while, and I feel it's like I said, it's just somebody leaned in and asked me if I would stand for the board, and that's why I'm standing for the board. because someone was like, "Hey, would you please?" And I'm like, "Okay." I've done a lot of fun stuff. Like I'm even wearing a sweatshirt. Whoa! That's from the initial Burners Without Borders back before it went and got regional around. I was part of the crew that went down to Mississippi and did the aid work right after Burning Man '05 because I was at Burning Man when it happened, and we had a giant project. If anybody remembers the machine, I was on that team, and so we were like, who better than us to go do stuff? So I've got a lot of love for Burners Without Borders, um, and I'd like to help reinvigorate some of that. I've spoken to a few folks, um, Tara and Dana and Kelly. Those are people involved with Burners Without Borders, and I'd love to see if I&W can get their fingers wet over there a little bit. The RAC, I am a friend of the RAC and would like to make sure that it is made healthy. I think that we need to be creating safe spaces for people. So I'm keen to be an open ear for how that might work and put in the time to see what I can do there. Big fan of that. I haven't done a lot of the things like Giles. You said you're a rave promoter. That's excellent. I haven't done a lot of promotions, but I have done a lot of other stuff. So I'm looking forward to what you bring to the table. Everybody brings a little something different. So I bring a willingness to share a little time and look forward to working with folks. Yeah. So there's a little bit of me.
Yeah.
That's
Thank you.
today. Yeah.
Thank you, Jimmer. Next one is Haley. Nonsense.
Hey, folks, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for having me today. I'm excited this is actually the first board meeting I've ever gone to, so that should tell you a little bit about my engagement up until now. I'm a relatively new burner. I've gone to the Big Burn a couple of times, and I went to Critical for the first time last year. So unlike some of the people here, I don't have as much organizational chops for running Burning Man events and organizations. The thing I really think I do bring to the table is I've been a leader in organizations for most of my career, and I have a lot of experience in process management, process development, working to build teams, making sure those teams function effectively together, identifying problems, gaining feedback, improvements. And my feeling about what I hear from the community about the board and what we've seen in the many public statements that have happened is that some of the skills that I have, I hope, can be useful to this organization. I have loved every part of this community that I've been a part of so far, and I kind of also don't necessarily feel great about adding more work to my life, but I care a lot about this organization functioning and it being an organization that continues to persist into the future as a great resource and as a thing that makes amazing things happen. And so I want to be a part of that, and I want to give my time and my energy to that. I also have a decent amount of experience in the Seattle kink scene, and so I help run a small organization in that scene, and so I'm excited about evolution of the RAC, working with the RAC, and figuring out what the future of that organization is going to be like and how we can cooperate with them. So that stuff is stuff I'm really passionate about and really excited to be a part of. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. And Giles.
All right, folks, hear me? Okay, cool. So, historically, I've done theme camps, art projects, event promotion outside of this community, or well, maybe not outside the community, but outside of Critical. I think I've tried everything but art cars, and I do feel like being on the board would be a good thing to contribute my skills. Theme camps are really comfortable. Like you can be a bit of a leader and not have your whole Critical be subsumed by by the things. So I do fear a little bit of upping my game here, but I think it's kind of time. From the art project, I've managed to do an art project once a year for a decade now. Simon Fire Edition, Heloscope, Moon Tower Defense. If you've seen the water cannon down by the water, that was our bid to get water placement. We were like, hey, how do we get good placement? Let's put a water cannon on the river, and it's required. So I definitely think I can speak well to artists. I will say what Frida's done, streamlining the artist work, I would like to see continued. The lowering of barrier to people applying, the reporting kind of pieces, all of that has been great. I was on the art council back when Marco was running it. I actually don't remember how long ago that was, right? But very, very nice process of, like, we were an org that looked at every application, looked at the budget, all those pieces, but I don't think we're there now, right? Like, a lot of this right now is about encouraging participation, and we're not oversubscribed. So I do think the very svelte application process and pieces is something I'd like to see kind of go. So if I'm on the board, I'm definitely going to look into the grants side of things. I've got a real passion for fire artists. Our group does a lot of fire. We have our issues with the fire marshal. We would like to smooth those kind of pieces over, figure out how to, like, sustainably teach fire artists and, have a good relationship with the city, with the folks in the county up at our events. There's some things there that if we have some good, like, long-term relationships with folks, we can make that work through. I've produced events of the couple thousand kind of persons back in the rave days, done renegades over the last couple of years that I've had fun with. I have not specifically done any production for Critical or these other pieces. Frankly, I kind of prefer to do smaller scale production stuff. It's more fun. But we'll see what happens if I get on here. From the board perspective, I did a stint as a president of a nonprofit in the tech industry. So I've done open standards, open source, like, how do we kind of do things? There's some germane there. Our 503 status was always at risk because we didn't do our accounting and pieces. I at least know some of the pieces on that. But at the end of the day, I listen well. I'm not a very controversial kind of person. I'm, maybe not quite passive aggressive, but I listen, right? And so, I kind of work through of just like, hey, can we make this happen? So if I get on this board, my interest is definitely, let's figure out how to pull this back together, find out what people actually want to do, and make, I think this community is well worth being involved in, and I think the energy's there, but it's had some problems over the last couple of years. So I think it'll be good to listen to folks and kind of work through and see what we can do. That's for me.
Yeah, no, I was muted. All right. Thank you, all the 4 candidates that are here. All right, let's move into community questions. So, community members, if you want to speak, you can also raise a hand and I'll take a list of whose turn it is. And you can ask a question. You can either ask it of all of our candidates or specific ones. Candidates, please try and limit your answers to about 3 minutes as we go. All right, questions.
I got one if
Frida, go ahead.
This is for all of the candidates, and I asked this because this is something that I wasn't very good at in my year. What are your strategies and what is your take on how to balance the amount of work that the board entails with your personal life? How you can keep yourself from getting overwhelmed and burnt out? I wasn't good at that. And so I'm just curious on how y'all feel about that aspect of it. This is a demanding position, and it does require, a lot of scheduling that might take away time from your personal life. And I'm wondering how you want to deal with that.
Jimmy, you're first.
Yeah, I think for me, it's always been about setting aside time to be essentially not on shift, right? And when I was on the board for Freezer Burn, we were just an LLC at the time, and we had the term of taking off your LLC hat. And that was, a time when like maybe you're just posting on a Facebook page as yourself. I'm taking off my LLC hat here. I'm just speaking as a community member. As far as like kind of the public interaction side of that. But I think privately, it means also just having boundaries. I've been involved in projects, whether it's a band or a burn event, for most of my adult life, and always had to balance that with my, personal relationships, with my thing. Nope, sorry, I can't join y'all for happy hour. I've got band practice. So for me, it's, it's about having healthy boundaries, both in that I set aside time to do the things that I need to do, and then also still making sure that there's time for me so that I don't burn out and overwork myself. And I think also culturally, that means creating a culture of collaboration and a less stratified leadership structure where maybe certain things that the board is currently handling don't necessarily need to be handled by the board. And like a volunteer could fill that role depending on the things. Right. I think it's about kind of lightening the load so that it isn't so demanding. It will always be demanding, but I think, trying to make sure we're doing that the best we can there. And that's how I respond to that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, next one. Jimmer?
Hey, sure. Well, I remember this as a thought that I thought about before I threw my hat in the ring. And so I sat with a different board member and I said, what's the skinny? How much time are you actually putting into this? And so I've gotten the download on what it was like for that person. And I'm currently sort of master of my own time. I'm enrolled in a university that is for a master's program, and it's online things. So I make my own schedule. So as far as making it to the meetings, I can do that. And as far as the extra stuff on the outside, I can move my time around. So thankfully, I don't have a specific position that is otherwise organizing my time at this time. So for that, I know what I'm getting into. Mm-hmm.
Nonsense?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would say I agree with many of the other things that have been said, like knowing your personal boundaries, creating spaces that are outside, not allowing your life and board membership to bleed together completely is always really important. I personally am also in a position where right now I'm not concerned about the amount of free time I have to do this. And I don't see myself being in a position in the future where that will become an issue. I do think that there are organizational ways to approach these problems. And I think, to function as a board, we have to be comfortable sharing and voicing our challenges and working together to work around those. So like if individuals are struggling and they are suffering in silence, then eventually that leads to people breaking and burning out. And that's a huge problem with leadership in organizations everywhere, right? So that's something that can only be solved by collaboration. I think finding efficiencies in our processes, like if everyone in the board is getting burned out, it means there's a problem with how we are operating. That's something that we need to find and solve. It can't just be solved by individuals creating boundaries. And then I think ruthless prioritization is always really important. So if there are certain things that are important for our existence, like 501c3 status, those might take priority over things that we care about, but are less important in a certain time period, right? We have to be willing to drop things that we just can't do if we just can't do it all. And I think like the point about volunteers, finding ways to not drop things is really critical, but we have to be willing to do that, I think, when it's necessary. So that's what I would say. Thanks.
Giles? You're muted. Giles, you're muted.
How's that? Better? All right.
Better.
I've had 2 events in the last couple of years that kind of brought me to this area. There was this thing called a pandemic that I really realized that this community I was missing and really wanted it to survive. And then on a personal level, I had a heart attack a year ago, and that was basically during Critical. So I got lots of information from Critical, but couldn't attend and really missed that kind of piece. So that brought me to wanting to volunteer here. Like I said, I have comfortably done theme camps and things for a long time, and I feel like now's the time to work here. I am a workaholic, so Frida, I appreciate your concern there, because it is definitely an issue. For me, I think finding 1 or 2 areas to contribute and try and kind of time box it to those makes sense. It definitely would be, like I said, the grants area interests me. I hope you want to stay on and continue doing those forever. But it's an area that I feel the artists, it is a core bit of what this org should be delivering. And I want to see that kind of go well. So I think time boxing for me is going to be the part of it, not take on too much.
Thank you.
All
Those
right.
are really thoughtful responses. I super appreciate it. I should have asked y'all this question before I ran for the board.
Yeah. Holly, you're next. You had some questions.
Yes, I was just going to ask. So this board makes decisions very collaboratively and has worked really hard over the last year. We've had a prior period where it was very top down, only one person does this task kind of thing, which really did burn a lot of people out and kind of create a lot of havoc. What ways do you seek to really be teammates, collaborators, make decisions together? Like that kind of teachability, humility kind of thing is what I guess I'm talking about, that not top-down leadership. What are your thoughts on that?
Jimmy, it's on you first.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something that's really, really important to me. I've always preferred to work collaboratively. When I played in bands, we worked as a collective. When I helped open a brewery, we chose the cooperative business model because it's worker owned. Everybody gets a democratic vote, right? So those are values that are ingrained in me. Coming up through the regional burn network in Austin, Texas, this model there is very much servant leadership. And the idea is that you take your normal like org hierarchy model and, that normally has like your CEO or whatever sitting at the top, and you flip it upside down. Shit doesn't roll downhill. It's a funnel. It goes to the people taking on those positions of responsibility, and they exist to support and empower their organization and essentially train up the next level of leadership so that they can step down when they've done doing their turn like Jimmer said earlier, right? It's you step in, you take on the responsibility so that the ecosystem can sustain itself, and you inspire the next group of people to step up. And when it's less about so and so's in charge of this and so's in charge of that, and more about everyone working together, then you have a far more sustainable community. And burnout's still a thing, but it becomes something that you manage rather than recover from. And that's kind of my take on collaboration. I love to be to work with like-minded people whose opinions I respect. Like I absolutely seek that out. That's my favorite kind of environment to work in.
Thank you, Jimmy. Jimmer?
Hey, sure. Yeah, thanks for the thinking of it. Yeah, the idea of collaborative working is largely how I participate and always have. All the way back to the one I mentioned in my intro, the group that was 300 people wide. For 2002, that was a massive, and it still is a big theme camp to bring to Burning Man. And it really took a lot of like congealing. A lot of the people who were part of that camp still are in the community and still deal with projects on a broad scale. And they're people that you would know. I'm not going to sit here and mention them, but it's what we built out of that. We had a giant circle. It was organized down in a warehouse that's in Fremont that isn't a warehouse anymore, and that sort of that feeling of community conversation is really what bonded me to the community. I've never stood for the board before because it was always kind of under control, and this year obviously there are some wheels that need to be held, and that's why I've been nudged over there, and I'm happy about being able to lean in because I haven't been living in the United States for a long time, but I'm here permanently now, and I've been back now for about 2 years. The energy of community is all I know. That's why I'm here. So as far as how does it work, I wouldn't know any other way. It's all about the conversation, nonsense. You're talking about bringing some project management skills to the table that I was unaware of by reading your thing earlier, and I'm super stoked that you can bring that to the table. Because a lot of folks like myself are very comfortable thinking outside the box because we don't organize a lot of boxes because we're very much about the artistic flair on things, right? And so I look forward to bringing the noise in a unique way, and I look forward to all that everybody else is bringing because it does take a community to raise an event or 9. So, anyway, so yeah, rolling with it. Cheers. That's me.
I think I'm next, so I'm going to just dive in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually want to piggyback on that thought, which is just like thinking about collaboration and working as teams. Like teams are much stronger when the people in them are really different and they have different skills and different approaches and different viewpoints. It pushes people to communicate more effectively. It pushes people to go slower in certain aspects so that they can understand. And I think that's a huge asset that we have as an organization, is the diversity of the people who are involved in certain aspects. There's certain parts of diversity I think we could stand to improve. So I'm really excited about that. I think that variety of skills is something we're going to really benefit from as an organization. One of the things I also want to address or talk about is the cost of training people or the cost of informing people. So I think that one of the things that happens when people get burned out in organizations is they get really shut down in terms of what they can take on. And so then they just try to make decisions as quickly as they can in as simple a way as possible, which reduces collaboration and reduces their desire to bring people into the fold and explain things to them about why they're going that way, why they made those decisions, et cetera. So it doesn't surprise me that maybe this organization at times in the past has had issues with top-down leadership. If people are feeling really, really burned out, they're just like, I can't explain this to anybody. I just have to, we're just moving forward in X, Y, and Z way. I assume. I don't know. So take that with a grain of salt. We have to be intentional about making that choice. If we want to actually like bring more people from the community in deeper, volunteers in deeper, to actually give them the information and the agency to decision make, that's something that we have to be committed to, and we have to make the space and time to do it. It doesn't just happen because we want it to happen. It takes additional effort and additional thought and planning. And so that's something that, from what I'm hearing, I'm excited that people are excited about. And I think we just have to figure out, like, what is that cost going to look like for us to do that? And how do we want to move forward with it? I love that method. I liked Wi-Fi's discussion of servant leadership. I think that's really powerful. It's a great model. And I think like the the word I'm thinking of is lineage. The succession process will be much more robust the more people in the organization, the more people outside the board have knowledge of the organization and how it functions and have been closely pulled in as we've run things. So that's a huge asset to us. It will make these processes, board elections, easier over time. To me, it's like there's no question that whether we should go down that route. We just have to figure out how, because there's a reason that things didn't go that way in the past. So that's a solution that we have to find and how to get us there.
Thank you. And Giles?
So at least my experience with the production staff of all this is that it is a well-run autocracy. A duocracy is a better word to say it, right? Like the folks that I've worked with on Spacement and Art and all those folks have had their shit together, and I feel like are very influenceable. So I don't have a good sense of the upper reaches of the board to really be able to comment. In my real world day job kind of things, I did a bunch of open standards and open source development, which is basically an attempt to, develop technology and things in groups and not have capitalism be the primary driver. Or if it is, you got to do it in a way that makes everyone else happy, which I guess if capitalism can do that, I'm okay with that. But I feel like it's a similar thing. The art groups I've been in, there's truly usually been a lead person. Right. But that person is basically useless if the team just leaves them in a huff because they're too much of a thing. So I've seen I am one that prefers relatively strong leaders there, but with the thinnest veil of, if you're not working out, you're just not working out. Right. So I'll kind of say those. I definitely I feel like we need to find the right way to engage folks more. Like, it's clear that burnout is a serious issue, and the last couple of years, whether it's pandemic or other things, have really shaken everybody. So some reset and some level setting of like, here's how we might operate in the future is important. So that's for me.
All right. Any more questions?
Thank you for that. By the way, I just wanted to say I really appreciated all your answers. And really, it kind of totally got at what I was thinking about. I've been worried about leaving the board and having it revert back to a top-down, one person does everything, totally siloed kind of thing. It's been really nice seeing the collaboration. I'm so excited that you guys are of that ilk.
All right, Lavender.
Hi, Rachel Lavender, Grants and Art Support for Critical and C Compression. I heard a lot of support for grants, which is awesome. And I because of that, I'm really really interested in your perspective on the treasurer position, because that is like literally the most important position when it comes to grants. And to be honest, it's been a real challenge in the last few years getting money out to artists on time. And like in some cases that has like damaged our relationship with artists. And so what I want to know from each of the candidates is like, do you have any like professional experience that would allow you to take on this role? And by that, I mean like I'm an accountant or a bookkeeper, or I manage a very large budget where I have to like pay out invoices on time and keep track of money and things like that. And if it turns out that none of the candidates for the board have that experience, what is your plan to make sure that we have a competent person in treasurer, and like what are you going to do about that? Thanks.
I will confess that I don't have a lot of relevant professional experience in the accounting side. I've worked with businesses and budgets in the past in like my production role and things like that. So I have a sense of what goes on in the financials, but I would never claim to be an expert on that front. I would happily defer to a more experienced board member to take on that role, but I would learn what I needed to fill it if it came down to it, and I was determined to be the best candidate for it. And I would really seek to kind of understand the basics of what it is that we need to maintain the organization and ensure that is handled. If that means hiring somebody for that position, right? I think in most businesses, right, that's the first thing you do is you hire an accountant, you hire a lawyer, and make sure that your money and your legal are squared away. So I would defer to the experts and as much as possible.
Hi, I'm guessing you're feeling complete. I am also not an expert with accounting. I do, however, have a good sense for what an artist needs as far as scheduling. So I would certainly be an alert member when it comes to timing and communications on that, because that is certainly where I bring a lot of ready reflexes from the artist who deals with grants, who deals with money, who deals with the production of material, construction, and such. So I would be comfortable around that zone. I don't know. Tuck's not here. Let's vote him in. Well, he's a lawyer, so no, I'm just kidding. Yeah. So as far as making sure that we had a lawyer, there was last term a little bit of a juggling arrangement having to do with a particular position that was sort of not particularly fulfillingly crafted and manifested, if I may be so delicate as to describe it that way. And what it amounts to is that there is a financial capacity within the INW, as far as I know, to cover particular sort of spot jobs, as it were. And so that could be something that we considered, where we could actually, talk to an accounting firm. My understanding is that there has been one previously that has officially taken care of our work, so that there was sort of a competent seal of professionalism based on our finances. I would like to see it in that way so that it could remain as open and accessible to people, because I know that that's definitely one of those things. I mean, there's that old line from Friday, like messing with my money is like messing with my emotions. You know what I mean? And when it's community money, it's community emotions. I'll try not to keep talking about when it started, but I remember when the first critical happened, and the INW was born of the bag of cash that it created, because the dude who had the bag of cash was like, this can't be my money. So I remember that conversation. He was like, like, let's do something else. Let's make a 501c3 and make this thing a group project. So, as far as that goes, we don't want the money to be invisible. So I would definitely be proactive around transparency, and if that meant hiring out for it, I'm keen. And as far as scheduling that money out, that is something I'm aware of. I appreciate the call in on that, Rachel, because you're absolutely right. I remember I got texted a free ticket the night before the show or something one time, and I was like, how is this a thing? You know what I mean? So anyway, yes, it's a very good thought, and should be kept forward. That's all I've got to think about there. Go ahead, Nonsense.
Yeah, I would say much of what Jimmer and Wi-Fi said, I agree with. If we don't have the expertise, we need to get someone who has the expertise, either through aggressive recruitment or through hiring someone. I have experience building financial systems from a technical back-end perspective, and I have project management experience. Those are the kinds of things that I bring to this. And I think there's sort of two parts to what you're describing. One of them is compliance. Like, we actually need to do certain things from a money management perspective in order to be compliant with our 501c3 status, right? And then the other one is accounts payable and receivable, how we manage, understanding who we've granted funds to and getting those funds out to them. I think those two things are a little bit separate, and I'm not sure whether they need to be managed totally together into the same person, but that's a thing that we can figure out. I think really, I actually think this is also related to the previous question in some ways, because I think one of the ways that we as a board will hold one another accountable in this process is like when we have someone who ends up responsible for this role, either doing it themselves or managing the people who are doing it, we should together collaboratively have a plan and be able to check in on that plan and see how things are going. And if something is falling through the cracks or is not happening the way it's expected, like, we should be able to rally as a group to respond to that problem and solve it. And I think that's like our best way forward. Yeah. Giles, go ahead.
So I had the luxury of the last board I was on. We had an executive director and a functional accounting firm. So I don't have the experience of the where we're at here. I would like to try and restore some of those capabilities if the budget will allow it. I will say 2 board meetings ago or so, there was some comments about not having issued 1099s to artists. And I had a bit of a visceral, what do you mean I'm going to have to refile my taxes because you didn't send this? I am of the blessed kind of people that this org's money is about tickets and enabling things for me. Finances are not our hugest bit of thing. But anyone who's struggling, or anyone dealing with finances, having to like refile your taxes is just, it's not what we want to put out to people, right? Like, we're trying to get them to do things. We're trying to make them their best. And now we're like, oh, a year later, can you go talk to an accountant to figure out how to do this? So I would like to make that not ever happen again, if it's, already happened. But the straight up, am I interested in the on that position? No, not particularly. But we'll sort out as this board gets seated. We'll figure out. I mean, there's going to be 3 things that need to go to the state. We're going to need a president, a vice president, and a treasurer, and we got to fill those roles, or the org just doesn't exist. So we'll have to sit down and talk through the sausage. But Rebecca, yeah, I would like to see the artist process go as smoothly as we can make it, or as smoothly as burners can do. I mean, nothing's going to get perfect, right? But we can basically try and make the lives of folks that are putting their time into these events, into our org, to something that, is not a shit show, right? Like, we owe them that level of competence at least, and it'd be great if it were better.
Okay. Anybody else with any questions? No. Questions going once? Questions going twice?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So I heard, I believe it was Nonsense mentioned the word diversity earlier, and I'm curious how each of the candidates would foster increased diversity in the burner community here in Washington.
Yeah, I think that one is a tricky one for any org. I think part of it is going to be how we how we present ourselves to the broader community. I think can play a part in that, and who we find, like who we attract to the event. If it's just a place for rich white people, and that's where we're going to kind of grow the community, then I think that's what we're going to end up with. I would like to see, Jimmer mentioned Burners Without Borders earlier. I think that that's a great way to be involved in the community and visible as more than just a party that, is an actual community that people want to be a part of. And I think that's one way that we can go about that. But also, I think, really by building a culture, I think that sort of embodies the principles, right? To the 10 principles, and really looks at them, that is a way that we can, we'll build a culture that people will want to be a part of, regardless of who they are. I think that's the goal. And by being active and visible in our communities, then we can have a better understanding of what different types of people would want, and maybe have a better idea of of their needs and their experience by listening and having a dialogue there. That's all I've got. Jimmer, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Well, active engagement. For those who know me well, they know that I travel as diverse as humanly possible. I I live a life that is uncomfortable in places that are not consciously or actively or unconsciously diverse. Like I revel in the beauty of humanity, and I mean I lived 14 years outside the United States, and I'm just gonna say active engagement with people from the community, part of people I consider part of my community, who happen to be of diverse folk, and so I know that I have personally been in that space as active and in that way. So I'll just keep being me and try to be more active for the community directly in this way as it is a project. Yeah, I don't know what to say about getting into details on that, but that is certainly part of my arena of care as well. That's Go ahead.
I'm really excited you asked this question, because radical inclusivity is probably my favorite of the 10 principles. I have a lot of feelings about it, and I would say what we're talking about in terms of diversity matters. Like, we're being very vague about it. Like, are we talking about racial diversity? Are we talking about diversity of backgrounds, economic statuses? Are we talking about people with disabilities, right? There's tons of different ways to talk about this question. We definitely shouldn't try to just bring people here for the sake of saying, you know, burner communities are diverse, like as a feather in our hat. We have to make sure that we have something to offer to people who are different than us. And that actually takes a lot of thought and effort. And we have to understand what those communities want and whether it aligns with what we're trying to create. And so I think we need deep thought to understand, and like outreach, communication with the communities that we want to engage, and an understanding of why we might not be meeting their needs or giving them things they offer. And if we want to bring people in from those communities and offer them things, we need to understand specifically what those things are. Shoot, I had like 10 other things I wanted to say, but I got really excited. I think that there is a lot that we have to offer as a community. I don't always feel that inclusivity is at the forefront of people's thoughts. And so I think understanding where we are falling short in that regard and how to bridge those gaps is going to be really, really important. Sorry, I'm just going to keep repeating myself, but I'm really excited about that question. I'm really excited about thinking about and figuring this out with this group. And I'm interested in understanding if there's a path there and how we can be more welcoming to a wider variety of people, and like how we can commit to that in ways that are deeply meaningful and not just a surface level thing to say like our percentages match population percentages. Thanks.
Yeah, it's interesting for me. So this last year was the first time that I ever considered CATS and some of their mission to, drive people around the event when they couldn't walk. I contemplated coming out to the event relatively shortly after surgery, and it almost seemed sane. It wasn't, but there was some infrastructure there that I really appreciated and had never thought about. Right, like I injured myself most events, but I arrived mostly whole, right, and could do all the things, and that worked well. So I definitely appreciate the infrastructure that was put there without any of my knowledge. The other side, on the grant side of things, I feel like we have two classes of artists, and I don't even know if class is the right word, but there's folks that really need the support to make their art happen, and we should direct more of our resources to them. And we have the folks that need the recognition and maybe access to ticket. There's some freebies that we've got that aren't cash on the dollar, right? And there are artists that need, if they're not paid 3 months in advance, they can't buy the shit, right? Like they don't have a credit card that might hold thousands of dollars, right? Like if they propose a grant for that, they need the money. So I think understanding our kind of different community of artists would allow us to be more open and diverse to who could support it. And so I would be very interested in structuring some of those kind of pieces to understand what will enable these folks to make their vision happen, right? What is it they need out of this event? What do they need from the org? And try and tailor it that way, which I think will get a more diverse group if we're open that way.
Did I see nonsense? You get your hand up? Cool. You go and then I'll get a shot. I have a thought. Yeah. You're on mute.
I remembered what I wanted to say, so I just wanted to add one more thing, which is I think simplicity and transparency for artists and participants are going to be really, really critical. I think one of the things that people in the org might not be as aware of is how convoluted and complicated getting information is, how specialized information is, and how getting connected to the right people and knowing who to talk to about what can be really challenging for outsiders and people who aren't deeply embedded in the organization. And that making that easier increases the chances that people who are not fluidly already existent in the org or connected to it can come and be participants. I feel really strongly about that. So just wanted to add that.
Nice. Yeah, I was spurred by your thoughts, Giles, about grants. And it's absolutely reasonable for us to consider people, telling us about themselves, a little bit like how the modern phenomena of signing up for a college allows you to write about yourself, as opposed to going to the territory where we check boxes. And we could be thoughtful, be intentional. You know what I mean? Like on Facebook, I'm on the Black Burner Project site now, and that's a real thing that's going on at Burning Man. There's nothing wrong with saying that we're honing in on a particular group of folks and being like, we wish you were around, and we'll make it worth your time to like show up and play. Like, let's give you can we go for high fives now? Like, this is not something that we should be shy about, and I'd be keen to participate in the building of that, because absolutely we need to mix it up, because there is no we, there is no us culturally, and when people start creating that, it makes me feel uncomfortable when I'm like, that's just awkward. The division really turns my stomach a bit. So I'd be down to really be aggressive about cross-cultural working. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, everybody. T-Kettle, you have a question?
To expand on the topic about diversity and inclusion, I have 2 teenagers. They are also biracial, right? Having been to Critical versus having been to Soak, the way that they integrate kids as young as 12 who have to earn their ticket into the community is lovely. To see the difference in my kid and the confidence and how much he has made this his community when he's at Soak. What are your thoughts about bringing more of that to the Critical type events and the things that Ignition Northwest does? Because it is very adult central in so many ways. And how might you go about doing that?
That's a good question. I don't personally have children, so it's not a perspective that I have a lot of experience with. And I think I would start by wanting to know a bit more about what Soak does in particular that you think we can learn from. I am a big proponent of cross-cultural learning and cross-pollination between burn events. I think that, learning from what other events do really well and being able to take that to another event and say, hey, this worked really well for these guys. They're about, let's give that a try for us. So I would love to hear what what Soak does differently that you think we can learn from. I feel like Critical is a fairly child-friendly event, and there's a lot of, it feels like, almost, kind of like children are able to kind of be free to explore the event, and so I would want to just learn what we can improve, and then see how we can implement that. Make sure that it's the right choice for our community and our events, but go from there. Jeremy?
Yeah, hey, T-Kettle, that's a great question. Thank you. I am all about it. My profession for the last decade plus has been in education, so I deal with children. It is a space that I dig. It's cool. Youngsters are awesome and energetic, and I have been, loving Critical forever too, and I have seen it change through the years, and recently it is very sexually active. The red light district is prominent. There's nothing wrong with that as a concept, but within the arena of raising children, there is sort of a scope of how do we sort of taper the education, have that children-friendly space in a way that doesn't blast, like the squirting tutorial, which is great for adults if they are into that, like have at it, like it's a safe space for that. That's cool. But and I think I remember this conversation before the last critical in a town hall as well, um, because parents are rightly attuned to the fact that there is a lot of adult behavior, and it's kind of like we need the adults who are doing stuff that is technically adult stuff, to respect the boundaries of that line, and respect that other people have different ideas of what that line is, and so we need to take into account other people's ideas. Um, and so I think it would be excellent to have like a team, like a council. Like this is part of my own. Sorry, I'm gonna get a little personal here. One of my personal conspiracies is to get a council of parents to speak to me about American children, so that I understand what they need, so that I can professionally address them, because I'm coming from a foreign experience. That's me. But the idea transposes here as well, where it would be pretty cool to have like a parents advisory council, like if it's a half a dozen parents who have like kids camp. I mean, like at Burning Man, there's a kids camp, right? And so there's a Facebook group for that, and there's a great conversation, like a live action community or conversation. And I would love to be an open ear to put into play some of the desires and needs that Tea Kettle, you and other parents have, because yeah, we should totally be the playground for everyone, and it shouldn't be awkward. And with camps giving out drugs, extra money, wow,
So one of the
that's
issues with my youngest
yeah.
was absolutely
Mm.
volunteering. One of the ones with my 17-year-old was camps putting out a bowl of drugs and no one monitoring it
Wow, that's
all
not
week,
particularly
right?
reason. Yeah, that's
Yeah. So
technically
on
deep
both
and
ends,
wrong.
how do we make this safer for them and more
Uh.
inviting?
Well, I think that thing right there should never happen. Nobody should ever put drugs on a table and walk away and be like, take what you want and leave the rest. That's just, there's so much wrong with that. Like, if people want drugs in their life, that's a personal choice. But, take it with you, and yeah. So wherever that was, like, I would be somebody who'd be like leaning in on that guy, be like, dude, this is really not a good idea. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot wrong with that. So, I think there's something to or uh, being adult as an adult. You have to, you know, keep it up. So, if you see something, say something, holler at a bro, like that's something that, I'd be fine rolling in and being like, hey, if anybody needs somebody to say something to somebody and they're uncomfortable having that conversation, like I'm good with being the conversation I'll use my face for their ideas. And I think that that's a valuable thing in a community sometimes, to just be a conduit for somebody else's idea. And I would like to welcome, invite, and I mean, Tea Kettle, I was sitting at breakfast with your Mark, and he was telling me things. I was saying practically the same thing to him, because I want to be able to be arms of the community at the computer. You know what I mean? So yes, imagine that my ears are totally open for that, and I would want, yeah, a parents' council, and
I like that
direct
idea.
line in. That'd be great.
Yeah, I would just start by agreeing that like this is clear feedback that there's an issue, which needs some additional focus. You're not the first parent I've heard describe having challenges having children at critical. And I would just agree with other sentiments that we should beg, borrow, and steal methodologies and processes that exist elsewhere whenever they will benefit us. And we can really only start doing that when people are communicating with us about the things that they're struggling with or that they're having challenges with. So it's incredible that we're getting this kind of feedback from from people in the community. I think there's probably a challenge here, right? In that I think some people don't want to parent while they're at a burn event, and some people really want their kids there. And kids are allowed, which means that we have to figure out how to make those worlds coexist in a way where everyone can have an incredible time and grow into like a inclusive community, the inclusive community that we want. I think there's a lot that we can do to improve our processes that I think, again, I'm just repeating myself, but borrowing from other organizations is a great idea for doing that. And I think, like when I think about it, I mean, I think of kids, I think everyone should think this, but I know it's not true. Kids are people, like we should treat them like people. I think that's a value that we should have as a community, and it's something that we can emphasize. I've seen, situations and scenarios where I didn't think people were necessarily having that ethos, and I think it will be a value for us to sort of think about how to maintain that kind of an attitude in our community as a whole, even if not everyone wants to interact with kids all the time. I think a parents' council is a great idea. I think just like getting that feedback, figuring out how to tweak the organization and the events so that they are friendly is a great idea.
So our group kind of went from 20 somethings going out to parties together to half of them having children and not. So I feel like our theme camp has experienced some of these definite issues. There's definitely been, the concepts of parental responsibility and folks in the camp actually stepping up and helping. It is definitely both sides of these things. Your drug story in a bowl makes me kind of think. I was running a bar shift, and my typical bar shift is I give my spiel. I am doing highball drinks. I've got this, that, and that. You want a spirit and a thing, and I get done with this little spiel, and the teenager in front of me goes, "Well, that would be illegal." And I was like, "Thank you for because I at this age, the potential, the different, yeah, I should card everyone. I know that. But this person slipped through the kind of pieces. So we do have to find out how to put things in place that are safety for both children and adults, right? There should be allowed adult areas that you can do things that are just not kid appropriate. And there should be interfaces where we're all mixing. And if you come up to my bar, I should probably ask for your ID, or here's how we make sure that, and in this case, the kids saved me, but I'm sure there are plenty of kids that would be like, cool, I can have a beverage because you're not watching, or I can go into the bowl of shrooms and pot and, get into trouble. Or I don't know it, and someone handed me a brownie and you just really fucked up. Right. These are all, gummies are a thing, right? Like they're a kid's candy that they shouldn't have. So yeah, I appreciate those differences. I definitely have been in the wrong plenty of times myself, and trying to understand how to make that experience work for everyone. I would appreciate
and all, like with the caveat, I own my parenting of taking kids, my responsibility with that. Right. You're bartending, you're at the bar, you have a bowl on the table is completely different than, hey, it's over here and available all the time to anyone, right? Even just guidelines with that and the bracelets and things like that. Love the idea of a parenting council to help bring this stuff to the people who don't necessarily think about it because they don't have kids, right? It's not your responsibility, it is ours.
All right, that's what I got. I think Beth Star had a comment or a hand up.
Yeah, Beth Star, go ahead. You had a question.
Current and also as former spaceman. Two things. I think we have talked about this in a much more general concept during critical, that we have a red light district for a reason. Do we want to be more mindful of our placement about certain camps for other reasons? and it's a super complicated topic and way bigger than we have time for right now. But for future reference, Spacement does manage some of this stuff from a higher level. So if you have issues like this with camps, you can always tell Spacement. And we can't fix it for the year that we're experiencing it, but it's good information for us to have. And this is not like tattletale, like, oh, these guys messed up and so they shouldn't be placed. But it's good for us to have information that adult stuff is happening in public at certain spaces because we can place them in different spots. So it's the kind of thing that like critical production is super happy to step in and be involved with. But we have to know what's happening. And so like you can totally anonymously send us an email. We will not use your name if you don't feel like getting people in trouble. And we're not going to punish. It's just good information for us to have. That's it.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions? Rita, go ahead.
Okay, so I've been trying to figure out how to formulate this question in a way that it could be answered concisely. And I apologize because I don't even know if I can ask the question concisely. But I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room for a minute. And I'm going to talk about the RAC and where we are. We've reached kind of an impasse where we stand historically. I believe that the RAC was formed with very good intentions in keeping the community safe. I believe that the work that they set out to do is incredibly important. And what we've discovered in the years that it has served is it is also unsustainable. And currently right now, we're not even sure on where it stands legally. So things need to change. And I'm wondering, in your opinion, is the work that the RAC does, I mean, obviously in a sexually charged community where there's a lot of substance use, we need to keep our community safe. But what I'm wondering is, what are your opinions on whether the RAC is something that should be part of a nonprofit organization, or whether it should come from an outside source, or, you know, what the solution is in trying to have a system in place that addresses the issues of keeping predators out of our community. And when I say predators, I mean it to the extent of not someone who, you know, maybe said something you didn't like, or your ex-boyfriend who you think is an abuser because your breakup was shitty. I mean, like, people who are actually preying on people and are committing violent or sexual acts that are legally not allowed. And I'm sorry if I didn't say this gracefully, but it is something that I think is an incredible hot topic for our community right now. And I feel strongly that there needs to be something. And I don't know exactly what the solution is. So I would like to put this question to the candidates and see if you've thought about this and if you feel like there might be a way through this problem.
Before you start answering Wi-Fi, I just want to give a little bit more clarity to the background information. So because RAC operates as an independent, almost organization, we can't call them an organization because they haven't actually incorporated in any way. So that's one of the issues. We can't cover them under our liability umbrella. So right now, if they were in continued operation, they would have no liability coverage. The only way to solve that problem and have them continue to be part of INW is to have them be a committee, which would mean that a board member would be required to be on it, and we'd have to follow our bylaws for committees in order for it to function as part of INW. That's literally the only way. Otherwise, they have to incorporate on their own and get their own legal liability coverage, or we'd have to find some kind of external agency to deal with this, or build something completely brand new. So just throwing that out
there. Thank you for an excellent question and the additional detail there, Mariah. Appreciate that. This is one that is really important to me. I've put a lot of thought into it. The duties of the RAC were basically handled by the board for, well, most of the regionals in Texas, that's how it's handled. They don't, it's just, there's an issue, you go to the board, and the board decides whether or not this person's allowed to come back to critical, or, you know, whatever the event is. So that's something that I have 3 years of experience, more than that really, because I was a ranger lead. And so, you know, all the issues that come up get, you know, I've had to manage those in the past. And so I think that the RAC started with great intentions, and it was a great idea, because every regional is trying to solve this problem. And we would sit down in Texas with multiple regionals saying, hey, how do we solve this? We can't share a list because of liability reasons. There's a lot of concerns there. So it ended up with every board just sort of still managing their own list in-house. And so the RAC was a great idea to, you know, hey, have a separate organization handle that piece, have it be made up of community members. And part of that was because the previous iteration of the INW board broke community trust. And one of their members was the predator, and had to be managed. And so we created this separate entity so that there would be accountability to the board itself. So I think I would love to find a way to make the RAC work, and find a way to have that checks and balances. But I'm also of the mind that the board can manage that responsibility as part of their being on the board. That is, you know, it's part of the role in my mind. So, but I'm definitely happy to find new ideas and new ways, you know, mining best practices from across the regional network, and just learning from each other. That's my best answer there. Jimmer, feel free.
Cheers. Yeah, in my introduction, I used the phrase "friend of the RAC" because I believe in what they do. I am aware of a lot of the critique as well. People who say that there was not a hearing of sorts. They weren't able to give both sides. This is a fair, honest, you know, piece of noise that somebody needs to listen to. What it sounds like to me is that the RAC came to be in a time when it was an emergency situation. I actually don't know because I was not here, but from what I can tell, it was born, and then it was useful, and then it got too big for the non-existent organizational structure that it didn't have, or something along those lines. So what I think Mariah said was a great idea, and that is a committee. So what occurs to me is, and I gotta say, I love Wi-Fi that you bring that experience from Austin up here, because yes, we need some like different version as a version to consider. And it occurs to me that if we were to have a board member as the committee head, and then populate that with a standing volunteer community, that could be an umbrella organizational thing, because we need that liability insurance to come through, especially for the people who were already the RAC. They put themselves out there, and they did a job on behalf of the community, and they deserve to have the coverage for that. They deserve our backing. So I'm very much about seeing how we could turn it into a healthy thing, turning it into a thing, and Yeah, Ms. Lavender, I noticed that you had some particular critique around, whether or not they pulled off restorative justice, and I appreciate that that was a thing. Um, and so I think that it is worth having uh, a specific conversation. You know what I mean? This would be a nice focused town hall type community gathering conversation. How do we move forward with this in a thoughtful way and not get distracted by other stuff that might be on an agenda that day? Because it's a big topic that needs a lot of voices to be heard. I see two great people's voices hands up, and I'm not even the last person to speak before them. So I'm looking forward to hearing what gets said because this is a place where we can clearly grow. So yeah, let's grow.
I would just start by saying that like consent concerns are one of my singular passions in the kink community. It's something I care deeply about and have a lot of concerns and reservations about. I don't feel like I'm going to be able to give like a concise answer about what the RAC should do now. I don't know enough about it. I really want to dig into understanding how it's been functioning and the issues that are happening. And I'm aware of the insurance issue also. I think the current setup of the RAC, the insurance concern aside, has been one of the most exciting things about the RAC to me, because I think if we think of the burner community as a group of pals, it makes it really vulnerable to all the kinds of problems that make consent processes really, really hard. Cronyism is really easy to grow up around things. People challenge each other. There's so many issues with having a fair process that actually gets people heard and gets them what they need out of that experience. And then, we, generally speaking, I would say are probably not experts in deciding what happens in these scenarios or deciding what happened, even if we go and talk to people in good faith. There are tons of pitfalls in this problem. There are short-term organizational decisions we could make, to solve short-term problems. But this question of how we make sure the community is safe, how we keep unsafe actors out of the community, how we recognize and identify them, it's huge. I would just say, like, I'm very committed to finding paths forward. And that said, I've never seen an organization do this well. I've never seen an organization in the kink community do this well in a way where power is not a huge, like people who are in leadership positions end up with a lot of social power that, for better or worse, can lead them to get away with things that they shouldn't. I've never seen, you would have to hope that everyone in leadership is operating in good faith. Fingers crossed that happens. There are always going to be scenarios where that doesn't happen. I'm not trying to be a negative Nancy. I'm just sharing some of my feelings about how I've seen this go. I think and I believe that we can put a process in place that will serve the community and will minimize harm and keep harmful people out. But I think it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of thought and a lot of deep learning. And I don't want to sell that short. Like, I think it's really hard. And, I don't think we should pretend to be restorative justice experts also, even if we want to execute that. Like, I know people who are very, very deep into that system and those situations and handling situations from that pathway. And a lot of people I see talking about restorative justice or attempting to use it are not experts. They are not deeply embedded in organizations or communities that have used that or are experts in it. And so we have to be really careful about what processes we try to put in place. My hands are kind of open on this. I want to know more about it and figure out what the right path is. I think there's some short-term things we can do, but I think it's going to have to be a deep, ongoing discussion with the community to figure out what the long-term solution will look like.
So I've mostly been on the outside looking in on this. Our theme camp went to RAC and tried to get them to weigh in on some members of our groups and some of our events and trying to understand who could be safe and what their status was. For better or worse, they wouldn't tell us anything, right? So one of the things I would say is if what Critical can do works to the theme camp level, that would be nice, right? I don't pretend to understand all of the liability issues, and especially I understand a little bit of the judicial side of this thing. Did something happen to some understanding of truth? The whole when might they be redeemed question gets even harder. So I don't have any answers here. I do see from the outside that this has ripped apart this organization in ways. And so we're going to have to address it. But I don't know any answers. I'll listen. With my theme camp lead hat, I know what I would like, as a service. So Critical Northwest is a service. I'd like you to bless my membership list. And if it's not good, then we need to have a discussion about why. But how that goes on, what would be involved in that, don't know. So that's what I got.
I believe Thespian is next in line.
Yes, thank you. I have some information, some knowledge about how the rack works. And there's 100 rat holes we could go down, which I won't go down. I'd like to actually address a specific question to Wi-Fi. And this arises from a meeting between the RAC and the INW board, where the question came up of how, without the RAC, would the board handle reports against board members? And one of the board members present said, well, we would just bury that. I'd like to know how the folks in Texas handled reports against board members.
I am trying to think if we ever had any reports against a sitting board member. I'm not sure that we have. I know that most of the Texas events, the boards are essentially hand selected. Usually, people are brought up and trained, and so succession planning is really big on our list. And so it's like the first thing you do is find your replacement, like start grooming a successor immediately. And so typically what that's done is it's created a culture where the leadership has been thoroughly vetted by the existing leadership. And but I know that anytime that there's an issue, well, no, actually I take that back. I think there was a one that counts, in that we had a board member that was suspected of taking money from the organization. One board member had thought, is this, I think this person's up to something. And we did a full accounting, looked at all the books, looked at all the numbers from years past reports, to essentially determine whether or not these accusations were true. We did everything that we could to, uncover the truth. And, we were ready to make a move if we had to, if we found that he had indeed been, if he had been engaged in financial misconduct against the organization, then absolutely we were ready to take action. We ended up not finding any record. And the, I guess, for lack of better word, the plaintiff ended up leaving the organization shortly thereafter. But they had been pushing and insisting and got a lot of us really kind of like, hey, we think you're right, and then, but hey, we did the investigation and let the truth be the decider. So I think, should something like that be brought to our attention, we absolutely would. I would expect nothing less than the board member in question recuses themselves from the thing. The remaining board members then conduct an investigation with full as much transparency as legally and I guess like from a safety perspective, right? Of as transparent as possible while also maintaining discretion and safety measures at participant safety first. That would be my approach there.
Thank you.
If I'm just gonna take a little weight off your shoulders there, Wi-Fi. Earlier when you were speaking, I think that something you said, and I picked it up the same way. It sounded like you had described the Austin scene, had actually had that experience. So I think that's why he pointed that question at you. Is it sounded like you had dealt with that exact situation. So when you started off with gee whiz, I'm not sure that ever happened. I could see how you were like looking for footing on that answer. So, yeah. I think that was part of how an earlier question sounded when you were talking is I also picked up like Thespian did a mistaken understanding that your board had actually done that. So that's why I think that question was pointed at you. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Makes sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely fielded a lot of the rack type issues. I mean, I'm aware of a lot of the broken stairs back home, and it just like I said is part of it. But as far as a like rack violation of a board member, that's not one that I'm familiar with happening in Texas. Just the financial one that I mentioned that I had the experience with. But I think next question, unless any of the other candidates wanted to.
Yeah, I believe Gattaca had their hand up.
Hi. So since the separation from the rack prior to critical and during that time period of as unfortunate, reports and allegations and experiences have not suddenly stopped. So the process that I think has happened while the rack was still in order for events like critical that was conducted by the board is the ability to be able to report to the board for these instances happening in the community and for the board to be able to hold their own meetings, to be able to navigate, whether or not this person would then be banned from community events such as critical. So this process, from my understanding, is still ongoing, and I'm wondering if the new board is still planning to continue carrying out this process, and if so, like what is the cadence in which you would be enacting this?
For me, I'm ready to dive right into that as a board, as a pretty top priority. I think it's fairly easy to set up a contact us page and get that put out on the site and have the ability for the board to take that feedback. That's what we do in Texas. Freezer Burn has that right up on their page. And I believe that basically, I mean, the event staff even uses it when going to, at the end of the day to load an incident. So it gets into our system so that it can be followed up on. So it's, yeah, it's a thing that I think is a top priority, and I would push to make, us a board that our community relied on in that way. And, if we find a solution that's more like the rack down the road, great. But in the meantime, it falls to us as stewards of the community. So, Jimmer.
It falls to us as stewards of the community. That is a great phrase. That is nice. Can we get that like written in stone somewhere? That is a great phrase. Um, yeah. Gattaca, that's a very good question because I haven't been a party to how the system has been flowing. And yeah, I can see in the background where Natasha and Frida are talking about the comment that that has been brought up because um, I can see how sarcasm is sometimes an easy reflex. In education, we are trained as teachers to not use sarcasm with children, specifically because all we got is the literal truth of what we say. And I think that in an official capacity, that's sometimes what we need to understand who we are. Um, because yeah, it's not something that can be joked about. There are certain things. Uh, this is how we learn. Um, to the question of how do we transpose the actual steps of the questions coming through Gattaca, I would like to see what process is currently in use. Because obviously not being in the room, I haven't seen it. So I would learn from what's there, learn from what the rack was, getting a hold of how that structure worked. And again, like I said before, I would love to have a community conversation about this very specific topic so that we could get sort of a variety of proposals towards what people think would be a good model. And then we could sort of suss out what might fit the population that we've got. Because again, it's, like Giles was saying, like, do we have enough people reaching out to the individual groups? Like, we need the bodies on the field. Like, we need people walking over and having a conversation. How many spaces need that? So how many steps need to be stepped? So how many people are needed? So how far can we actually reach? So we need to keep in mind, the scope, and are we just hitting people at the gate? There's a lot to consider. So what the shape of it looks like, I have no clue because I don't know what's being in used right now, but I'm all about keeping the function live because our community's too freaking awesome. And yeah, there's gonna be some creeps that are like, "Oh, there's sexy naked people over there. I'm gonna go eat some." No, dude, you can't come in. You know what I mean? So yeah, we should have that wall somehow. And I will definitely be um, interested in hearing what you've got on your mind, Gattaca, for shape of that system because I appreciate your perspective on this arena of thought. So by all means, don't stop talking. But don't have any tools yet. Yeah. And
Yeah, I
nonsense.
would. Oh,
Good.
sorry. I would say it's one of our primary responsibilities to make sure that people who come to our events are safe. That said, like, in most cases, we don't discover that someone is unsafe until someone has been harmed. That's a sad fact about what being an open organization means. There are things we can do, and I think what Wi-Fi was describing about having a system where things like the information that passes into organizational databases or whatever system is managing our like how we're tracking these things are updated regularly and reviewed consistently. I'm aware that the RAC has, there's like a huge backlog of consent violations that haven't been investigated or reviewed, and a lot of people who have not gotten the help that they need. And I think that's it's a pretty big failure of these organizations as a whole, and it's a sad thing that we all have to accept as a community that's been going on. I think spending the time that's needed and getting the resources in place so we can review those, we can follow whatever process exists today until we have a solution for the new process, or we birth a new process, I think is important. I think evaluating the existing process for how good it is also critically important in the short term. I think getting to the place where there's like hundreds of reports or whatever, I don't know how many there are. There's like a backlog of reports that aren't addressed and may never be addressed. Fingers crossed that doesn't happen. Fingers crossed we get to go back and actually review these. I hope we get out of that situation into a much more real-time scenario, and that we get the support and resources in place that's needed to do that.
So I wanted to kind of comment on what Mark said. Our theme camp was trying to come up with a process that would let us navigate some of this. And the concept, we've got 3 board members, if you want to call it that, right? We got 3 folks that are in power on things, and the question of what to do if they're one of the people that reports. Where our head at there's a process that defines sort of how you evaluate something and information flow, like who actually learns about this kind of thing, who does. That process doesn't necessarily have to be done by the board, right? And especially in the case of a board member, it shouldn't be, or at least you got to recuse enough of the board to make it fair. So I would hope that we could come up with something where here's what protects the people involved. Here's what comes to a fair decision. And that process, when it is a board member, could be executed by someone else, right? Because that allows you to basically say, here's how we handle this case. Our head, because we're a small enough group, our head was around random picking, like literally the committee that's going to look at this thing is Joe, Bob, and Jill. And they were selected. They could recuse themselves. I know the person, whatever. But in general, it came down to just like spread all the load, because no one enjoys this thing, right? No one wants to sit down and run through this muck and do this. I mean, people might be called to it, but it's a burden, right? So at least in the small scale, we felt that people could do that. Now, this system has not been tried. Like, we've spent about 1.5 years trying to come up with this thing to try and address some of our own issues. So I don't know if it scales to this size, but I do think we need a process that we can run kind of efficiently, and then the error case where it's not run efficiency, but it's run much more methodically because of who's been accused. That's kind of the pieces I have on that. I don't know our current state on the org. I've attended enough to see the tension, but that's as best I know from the outside.
Okay. Anybody with any more questions? I think we're about ready to wrap this part. Unless somebody feels very strongly asking about one more thing. We're going to have one last question. Going once. Going twice. No further questions. Thank you very much. All right. Let me open our agenda and see where were we.
It looks like if any of the candidates want to make any closing statements, you get some floor time for that, and then we'll talk about our process.
Yep. Wi-Fi closing statement.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for dialing in and for the excellent questions. And I'd also like to thank the current INW board members for keeping this thing running and doing the hard work. And the new candidates, it was great to meet some of y'all. And yeah, I hope we can work together and build something that this community really loves. I really care about this community a lot, and I'm hopeful and eager to get things moving. So thanks. I'll pass the baton to Jimmer.
Hey, yeah. I'm happy to be here because there's already something built that the community loves. And there's clearly a lot of passion and meaningful feeling from the questions that are here today. Um, we all want to see it get better. So, um, you know, everybody that I've heard from today, you know how to get in touch, you know. Um, please don't stop being in touch. You know what I mean? Like I'm like Tea Kettle, the Parents Council, you know, and Gattaca and Frida, we're talking. I'm thinking along the lines of getting like a real conversation. What do you want from what's needed out of something that was the rack? Can we get something that really accesses everybody's needs? You know, and how do we create that? Let's make that a community conversation because it's something that impacts us all. Um, you know, the accounting questions. Excellent inquiry. Marco, thank you for holding on to that. Frida says she has ideas, and I love you for that. Yeah. You know, it looks like we got a great crew, fo bunch of folks stepping up, you know, like you, Wi-Fi nonsense and Giles. Well, I haven't met you guys, and I'm excited to see you and hear you, and I'm looking forward to all this, because yeah, INW's kicking butt. It's been doing it forever, so let's keep it rocking. Let's keep it solid and right, and people can be like, yeah, dude, that's doing it right there. So, oh yeah, and BWB, let's bring that back.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, I think I'm a lot newer to the INW community than some of the other people here. And I want to start by saying, if you don't know me, I want to know you. Like, I think the relationship building part of this is going to be a big part for me, in addition to just like learning the insides and outs of how the organization runs. And that's something that, generally speaking, I'm quite skilled at, and I'm excited to do. And I'm excited to build something with this group that we can be proud of. And I think there's a lot to be proud of already. And organizations always have pain. Like, pain is a part of how human beings interact with one another and create things. And it's not a sign of failure or of irreconcilable problems. Like, we just have to figure out the ways of getting through those challenges. And there's always going to be that. Like, people are always going to have complaints. We're always going to have to address them. That's a huge essential part to how we get better together. And I'm very thankful for everyone who came to talk to us, to challenge us with questions, to bring feedback. We will not be able to do what's needed to support you guys and create the kinds of experiences and events that you guys want unless we hear that from you. Like, those things, the good, the bad, and the ugly, are essential for us to be successful. And I'm just excited to be like a conduit for y'all's passions and curiosities and to help us make weird shit a reality.
So the pandemic, I think, did a huge damage to all of our communities. I feel like this one specifically, given how touchy-feely we are, if I can say it, everything's interactive, everything's in our face, everything's there. We took a lot of damage over times. I think, there's no way to say that all the things at our feet at this org are from the pandemic, but it certainly didn't help. Right. And as we kind of learn to be back in the same space, as we learn what Zoom meetings mean versus town halls in face versus, festivals, I think we'll grow again together. There's been just a lot of stuff I've learned in this community, a lot of things that have made me better, that I've really had a lot of fun. Right. And I hope to kind of help enable that for folks. We didn't say a lot about it this time in Burnout, but getting new people into this community, the diversity thing probably touched on it, but we have to find ways to grow, right? And by being welcoming, by being just having our shit together, I think we can kind of help help grow again. And I'd like to see that kind of happen. So that's where my head's at.
Okay, thank you very much. All of our 4 candidates that are here and the 1 candidate that is not here. By the way, there are no rules that disqualify people if they don't attend the town hall.
No, they just have to be treasurer. That's
yeah,
the only
yeah. We voted him as the treasurer. Yeah,
we've already decided that.
Yeah. The only
that's
way somebody can like get not voted is literally if they have 0 people voting for them. Process. So we will open our voting on Saturday the 13th at after like 9:30 p.m. The reason for that is we need 10 days from the day that we sent out the email, basically introducing all of our candidates, until we can open the voting. That email was sent on January the 3rd at 9:25. So 10 days from that is coming to Saturday the 13th after 9:30 p.m. Voting will be open for a week. We will send the link to vote. It will require you to log in using your Firestarter credentials. Since voting is only open to members, anybody who's ever been to Critical is a member. Also, anybody can join as a member. We don't have any conditions for joining. All you need to do is fill out a form on our website. Voting will be closed at 9:30 on January the 20th, and we will announce results in an email within like 5 days after that. We will also post the link to the YouTube recording of this town hall here. And
I'll post a link to the recording tomorrow morning.
Yep. Listen, we'll also post the notes that Suga has been diligently and very, very thank you for that, Suga, has been taken of this entire meeting.
Thank you.
Yep. I believe that's it. Anybody has anything else to bring to us?
No, thanks everyone for coming and for giving great answers and your time and energy tonight.
And thank
Appreciate
you
it.
for, just caring for this community and just showing up and being here to try and move all of this forward. All right. Thank you very much, everybody.
Happy New Year. Good night.
See you, folks.
Good night.